Monday, May 40 here. We still look to be on track for a decisive Donald Trump victory tomorrow. Democrats are just not banking enough early vote to be able to defeat the Republican surge at the polls tomorrow. Right, this is the latest from Mark Halperin this evening.
As I said, confidence on both sides. And we've seen the Trump confidence has been extremely high when Joe Biden was the nominee, and with few breaks since Kamala Harris became the nominee. What is their confidence based on tonight? The same thing it's based on. Their internal polls show him doing very well. They don't believe that Kamala Harris has convinced people that they could trust her to be a good commander-in-chief or a good steward of a good economy. They believe they've done a better job of defining her on their terms for the undecided voters as failed, weak, and dangerously liberal. They have believed, and they've argued this for a long time, that the makeup of the undecideds are more of the profile of a Trump voter than a Harris voter by 2-1, more male than female, more concerned about the economy and immigration and the issues on which Donald Trump has done well. So as we've gotten here down to the end, they've become quite bullish on the prospect of winning 5 of 7, 6 of 7, or 7 of 7 of the battleground states. And I won't say they say there's zero chance that Kamala Harris will win, but they're very confident that Trump's going to win, more confident than they were in 16 and 20. Today, they put out a big memo about the early vote, and they say what we've talked about here. It appears, from what you can tell about the early vote without overreading it, the amount of vote coming in from the major cities, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, is down. Milwaukee, down from 2020. The amount coming in from rural areas is up from 2020. And we're going to look in a little bit at Pennsylvania. I said when the early vote came in, if this continued, there'd be no way to go into Election Day and think she could win. It's changed somewhat in the Democrats' direction, but not very much. And going to Election Day, that's the source of their confidence. Now, we'll talk tonight with our guests about the late early vote and where we stand on that. I asked a Republican strategist, what did they see in the early vote that they think is a fair-minded Republican strategist who can think outside the red box. I said, how could anyone look at this data and not reach the conclusion that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, in some of these states for Kamala Harris to flip the script and do better, have the Democrats do better on Election Day voting than they've done, to not be swamped by the surge of Republican voting on Election Day? And here's his quote. He said, because no sober person has any faith in any of these lunatics who think they can count votes based on the available data. We've been burned before. So this Republican is saying the Republicans who are arguing that the early vote, as it's almost final now, makes it difficult for her to win, are making too many assumptions. Okay. Why is the Harris campaign confident? Okay. They're confident because, number one, they say that independents are going to Kamala Harris. David Plouffe on Friday, the campaign continues to say, if you look at the New York Times poll, the Des Moines Register poll, they claim in their own data, independents are moving to Kamala Harris here in the end. Obviously, they're confident because they say women are going to make up a huge portion of the electorate and they'll vote overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. They look at Donald Trump's behavior and they say he's creating the decision for undecideds to vote for her because his performance has been so off the rails in the last few days. And finally, they are of the belief that they've done a good job of lowering the percentage of the vote that will go to the Green candidate or Cornel West or others, and that Donald Trump can't win out of what is effectively a two-person race. Okay, so that's the source of their confidence. Let's talk about Pennsylvania. Okay, this is a state where the early vote matches, as I said, what we've seen other places. Disappointing turnout in Philadelphia. Go ahead and put up the Pennsylvania chart, please. Okay, not enough vote coming from Philadelphia. Lots of votes coming from rural. So this chart looks at 2020, 2022, and 2024 in the early vote, the mail-in vote. And the most important thing I think to look at is where it says GOP returns and Dem returns. So you see in 2020, the GOP returns were 580,000 and the Democratic return ballots were 1.6 million. Okay, almost over a million vote difference on the early vote. And then go to the first column and you see the Republican returns are slightly higher, almost 600,000, but the Democratic returns are down 600,000 from 2020. Okay. So again, in a world where vast majority of Republicans are going to vote Republican, vast majority of Democrats are going to vote Democrats. Democrats have a big lead. They have a 400,000 vote lead. But we know, just as we knew Democrats would have more votes early than Republicans, we know that Republicans will have more votes on Election Day than Democrats. So if this is the final lead, and I think we'll get another round here, but We will get another round, or maybe two. But this means that Democrats in 2020 went into Election Day with over 1 million vote lead, and they barely won the state. They won the state by less than 100,000 votes. And this time they go into Election Day with about a 400,000 vote lead. Okay, that's a big difference, right? So what explains the fall off? It's some combination of a lack of organic enthusiasm for Kamala Harris and the vaunted Harris turnout operation not being able to turn out as many early votes as they did 4 years ago. So are those two factors going to be different on Election Day? It's very hard for me to see how she's going to win Pennsylvania if you're just looking at this. If you're just looking at this, it's very hard to see. And as I've told you before, I believe we're going to learn after the election that the Trump campaign had some tricks up their sleeve regarding get out the vote. Okay. Now they're both in Pennsylvania. They've been in Pennsylvania today. She's spending her day there. She's got a big concert tonight. Maybe Democrats are going to flood to the polls on Election Day, and they won't. And they go in with a cushion of 400,000 or so. Other big tea leaf today in Pennsylvania is Bob Casey, who previously had run an ad bragging about his working with Donald Trump favorably. No ads talking about him with Kamala Harris. Here is the closing ad for Bob Casey's campaign in Pennsylvania.
I'm Bob Casey, and I approve this message.
4 candidates for Senate. Who's standing up to China? It's Bob Casey, who stood with Donald Trump to put tariffs on China to protect American jobs. Dave McCormick, he sold us out to China, getting rich by investing in China's military and investing in China's biggest fentanyl producer.
Wall Street Republican David McCormick, he is absolutely the candidate of special interests and globalists.
So that ad's doing a lot of business, right? It's promoting the third-party candidates who they think will take vote away from Dave McCormick. And it's linking himself to Trump again. And again, if you look at that, you'd say Bob Casey thinks Kamala Harris is not the person to hitch his wagon to in the final days of the campaign. Okay, so.
All right, Democrats were saying that they would need to have at least a 500,000 vote lead heading into Election Day. And right now, their election lead is just a little over 400,000. It's hard right now to see how the Democrats could possibly win Pennsylvania. All right, this is Mark Halperin from
what
this
you have
morning.
Now is tons of senior Democrats are in the states. They're door knocking, like people who've run presidential campaigns are literally going to Michigan and Pennsylvania and door knocking. And those people are honest with me because they're worried, and they're not in the business of like Wilmington is. They're really worried. Okay, they may be wrong. They may be wrongly worried. The Pennsylvania numbers, when they come out today, if she's below 400,000 vote lead compared to Biden's lead in 2020, it's going to be problematic for her. What is the biggest indication that we've seen that the early vote is a problem for her? It's Jim Messina talking to Jen Psaki. Jim Messina, if you go watch his cable TV appearances, he has been, first for Biden and then for Harris, the most boosterish person about them. Just rose-colored. Everything that's going on with Biden and Harris is fantastic. Here he is with Jen Psaki talking about the early vote. Please play 103.
Okay, what's their biggest concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. The early vote numbers are a little scary, and you and I have been texting back and forth. Republicans didn't do what they did last time. Last time Trump said don't early vote, and so they didn't. Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary. Scary.
So Dan, decode that for people who aren't familiar with Jim Messina. How scary is it that Jim Messina says it's scary?
It's scary. I mean, it's brutal honesty. And, you know, you look at every major urban center in the swing states, and there is not one, not Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Phoenix, where Democrats are doing well. And the problem is it's two voting blocks. It's Blacks, Latinos, people of color, and young voters. They're not seeing the turnout yet that they feel that they're going to need. So the issue is, can you make it up in the suburbs or with older voters, as you know, you talked about with Ann the other day? But something's got to give. Otherwise, it's hard to see, you know, where the numbers are going to come from.
Sean, what you respond, I just want you to incorporate one other question in your answer, not as a partisan, but as a practitioner. Is it possible that the turnout operation of the Harris campaign, which has failed to some extent in the early, will be better on same day, on election day voting tomorrow?
So the thing that I want people to understand is that what Republicans did was change a pattern. For example, me, I'm an election day voter. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to preach it, I got to go do it. So I went and voted early and urged everyone to do it and got them to do it, right? Democrats are early voters by nature and by practice, right? So the question is, if they're not doing it now, why? Right? I mean, in theory, you're right. They could still show up tomorrow in droves, but that defies, it's the opposite, right? It's sort of, it doesn't make sense. Now, so it's possible.
Okay, question in the chat. What's the story with that bewildering poll out of Iowa showing Kamala Harris with a 3-point lead in Iowa, a state that everyone else think is going overwhelmingly for Donald Trump? The very respected pollster, I think early vote is more important than polls at this point. So it's just one outlier, and we'll know a lot more in about 21 hours.
But it's, you know, again, this goes back to why Republicans changed our behavior, because we were told, hey, bank that vote. It saves us money. It's, you know, we don't have to worry about existential threats to that, you know, weather or, you know, childcare issues, what have you, that could potentially keep you from voting. You have to question why Democrats aren't doing it unless they aren't voting. And that's the big question. Like, do they just want to wait for one more commercial? Maybe, but that does not portend well for her. And so I think obviously, you know, there's always the possibility, but it is not a good sign for the other side. And look, I think the cool part is when you look at some of the statistics, Allegheny County is one that comes to mind in Pennsylvania, Western PA, 87% of people.
So I predict by this time, tomorrow night, all right, in 24 hours, we will know who won the presidential campaign.
There tend to vote early, Republicans. And when you look at how well we're doing there, only right now about 9% are election day voters, meaning you still got a lot that can show up on election day as well. So that's a very positive sign for Team Trump. They got a lot of people who tend to show up, but they still got a lot of people who are either low propensity or first-time voters to come.
Mark, can I just add the one piece of, because again, Democrats are very worried about blacks and young voters not
and Hispanic.
And Hispanic, absolutely. Well, and just her performance with Hispanics in general.
Correct.
The Harris campaign believes they are not seeing the bro vote so far in early vote. Doesn't mean they won't turn out on election day, but there is some comfort that at least while Democrats are underperforming with that group that might be the key, they don't quite see a surge yet.
And we're seeing, I mean, that's universal, right? So you got a lot of young college kids that are all fired up for Trump, but haven't shown up, at least in the data. One last thing, I just from the audience standpoint, because we've been asked this before on the Messina comments. Look, when you're a guy like Messina, I think, Mark, you framed this well. Like, he's got a lot of credibility at stake. And so he does not want to go overboard and be exuberant for Kamala. If he knows this was a warning signal to them saying, hey, I'm still with you, but. And that's the thing that people have to understand is that there are people on both sides that are still for their person, but they've got to be careful because they don't want their credibility to be damaged, saying there's no question she's going to win. So I take that Messina warning very seriously.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know exactly why he did it, but I think the fact that he did it says things are a problem. All right.
Well, and by the way, Mark, the fact that he dropped that Jen Psaki and probably the whole, 2012 senior leadership is on a text chain, and we've all been talking about this, right? Yeah. That was another ooh.
Yeah. And I won't show the Axelrod clip. Axelrod was not quite as negative as Messina, but he was pretty negative too, and leaning into the traditional role of David Axelrod, which is to trash any Democratic presidential campaign he's not working on. It is not as disastrous as it was in the first.
Wait, is this the...
What you have now is tons of senior...
Okay, this is a different clip. All right.
3 days for the Democrats, but it's still really bad. And the Harris campaign has done a great job of spinning the national media on it. And when you talk to people in the states, whether there's two categories of people in the states. There's more junior people who don't lie about the data and what it means. What you have now is tons of senior Democrats are in the states. They're door knocking, like people who've run presidential campaigns are literally going to Michigan and Pennsylvania and door knocking. And those people are honest with me because they're worried, and they're not in the business of like Wilmington is. They're really worried. Okay, they may be wrong. They may be wrongly worried. The Pennsylvania numbers when they come out today, if she's below 400,000 vote lead compared to Biden's lead in 2020, it's going to be problematic for her. What is the biggest indication that we've seen that
Okay, so she has about a 410,000 vote lead.
the early vote is a problem for her? It's Jim Messina talking to Jen Psaki. Jim Messina, if you go watch his cable TV appearances, he has been, first for Biden and then for Harris, the most boosterish person about them. Just
Okay, I think I played that. Yep, played that. All right, this is Mark on Sunday.
Country have an election is going to the legal stuff is, unfortunately, because there's no way to run a country have an election, is going to be very intense. And we all know, both sides have heavily lawyered up, but Democrats in particular have to try to deal with their shortfall in early vote in Pennsylvania.
A question from the chat. Does RFK Jr.'s retarded health reform plans give you pause when voting for Trump? No, because I don't believe Trump will give him any real power.
By curing a lot of these ballots that have flaws in them, dated wrong or no date or whatever it is. And so I think you're going to see a big fight over that. And those of you who remember, hanging chads and all of that, these things are very subjective, and there's no right answer, right? What's equal protection, what's fair if lots of voters who are disproportionately Democratic voters have failed to follow the rules? Is it fair to say those votes shouldn't count because they didn't follow the rules, or is it fair to say let's give them some leeway because every vote should count, and just because someone didn't follow the idiosyncratic rules doesn't mean we should disqualify their votes? There's no good answer to that question, but literally the presidency could be decided on that if it does come down to Pennsylvania.
Okay, this is
All
Newt
right, Mr.
Gingrich
Speaker,
yesterday.
floor is yours.
Well, let me say, first of all, I have admired Anne's work for a very long time. I think she's a consummate professional. I don't happen to agree with this poll, but I think there can be anomalies, that we can talk about later. You introduced me on your show to Seth Keshel, who focuses on registration patterns, and I was sufficiently perturbed by the Iowa results that I went to him among 7 or 8 other people, and it was fascinating because he essentially thinks that it is extraordinarily improbable, just given patterns that have been building. And of course, you did have an alternative poll that came out about the same time that shows Trump winning, I think, by 10 in Iowa. So I checked in with Linda Upmeyer, the former Speaker of the House, and she said they had no indications anywhere in any of their counties of the kind of erosion this would imply. But I think you have to expect this at this point. I mean, the truth is, this is a hard-fought campaign, and I think Keshel's work, if you believe it, in terms of the registration patterns, would imply that we are much closer to a Reagan-Carter result than we are to 2016 or 2020. And we'll have to wait and see when the first votes come in. But if you look at the early voting patterns in virtually every one of the swing states, they're staggering. So I would say Anne's contribution, certainly she is so well respected that everybody who is serious about politics last night got busy calling friends and emailing friends and trying to figure out what the devil's going on. We'll see. It could be a harbinger of a dramatic change, or it could be one of those occasions when.
This is Halperin arguing it's not going to be close.
Conventional wisdom amongst Democrats is, and they're buoyed by Ann's poll, is she's closing strong Trumpism. And that undecided, that David Plouffe argued last week, are breaking her way. I think right now, people ask me all the time what's going to happen. I think right now, I continue to believe that for a while, it's not going to be close. Either the makeup of the electorate is going to be 55% female and she's going to win, or it's not and she's going to lose. And that could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be different state to state. I think in 6 or 7 of the states, the electorate will be so strongly women, and so women so strongly for her that she'll win, or not. And that'd be my guess right now, that it's going to be one way or the other. In addition, the kind of conventional wisdom.
Right. This is from Mark Halperin's show yesterday afternoon.
There was an article that said that if Trump wins, that is somewhat of an indictment on the media, right? That means that 50% of the people aren't listening. So I'm just curious what you think about, whether we'll see real change in some of the propaganda on, each side, right? But that leans heavily left often. Whether we think we'll see something that will be different.
Yeah, it's a great question. There wasn't really a change after 16. There was kind of lip service given to, well, we missed it, so we need to understand more. But the bias, I've said this many times on this platform and elsewhere, the bias in the last couple years against Trump has just been overwhelming. And that doesn't mean he's a perfect person. It doesn't mean he doesn't say outrageous things. He made a joke today about the press corps being shot at. He says and does outrageous things. Yeah. And worse than outrageous. But the press bias is pronounced. And I think if you're looking for an indication about whether the press is willing to understand the level of egregious bias, I think you'd look no further than the complete failure of accountability on the press Democratic cover-up of Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity. They acted for years like it wasn't happening. It was happening in plain sight. The American people saw it, but they pretended it wasn't happening. Then when it became necessary to help Nancy Pelosi force Joe Biden out of the race, the press cooperated with that. But then if you read the accounts of why Joe Biden got out of the race, it's all about, he couldn't win, or, Nancy Pelosi wanted him gone, rather than an acknowledgement, not only that he had a loss of mental acuity, but that the press didn't cover it for 7 years, even though it was obvious it was happening. So that suggests to me that there's a great desire to pretend that the press isn't biased and to a great.
Okay, I'm curious what Megyn Kelly has to say at the Trump rally.
Changed the law in California to make sure the taxpayers would pay for their sex change operations. She was not just following the law, she changed the law. President Trump will stop it. He got mocked by the left for saying he would be a protector of women. He will be a protector of women, and it's why I'm voting for him. He will close the border. He will keep the boys out of girls' sports and where they don't belong. And you know what else? One more thing. He will look out for our boys, too. Our forgotten boys and our forgotten men. Guys like you. Guys like these guys who've got the calluses on their hands, who work for a living with the beards and the tats, who maybe have a beer after work and don't want to be judged by people like Oprah and Beyonce, who will never have to face the consequences of her disastrous economic policies. These guys will. He gets it. President Trump gets it. He will not look at our boys like they're second-class citizens. And ladies out there who want a bit of girl power in this election, let me tell you something. How can you win when the sons and the husbands and the brothers and the dads you love are losing? It's not a win. We care, young women and older, about the lives of our children, the safety of our children. And we need not get so obsessed with what happens when they're in the womb that we forget about taking care of them once we're here and they're loved. Last point, what I don't want, what I don't think you want, is the left's version of masculinity. You see that ad they did about Trump voters trying to encourage women to lie to their husbands so that they could vote for her instead of Trump? That's their version of what marriage looks like. An overbearing husband who bullies his wife into saying she voted one way as opposed to an honest, open relationship. Oh, wait, I'm talking about Kamala and Doug. Okay, sorry. Where was that story in the news? Where is that story? I don't remember a single media person, not one, who sat with him, asked him about the abuse allegations against him by a successful professional attorney who has great details, who has receipts, who has witnesses. No one even asked about it. I'm not into their version of toxic masculinity or new masculinity. I prefer the old version. Them, all of you, and I prefer a president who understands how to be strong and how to fight. I hope all of you do what I did last week. Vote Trump and get 10 friends to vote Trump too.
All right, Megyn Kelly doing a good job making the case for Donald Trump. All right, this is Mark Halperin talking about a guest.
Culpability. So I'm not really sure what the Democratic Party or the media will say if Donald Trump wins. I'm not sure how they'll explain it. I'm not sure what responsibility they'll take for it. I think, unfortunately, and I wrote an article about this 2 days ago. Unfortunately, the the preponderance of blame will not go to, well, Donald Trump actually is talking about issues that a lot of voters care about, or the Democratic Party on some issues has gone too far to the left. It will be Joe Biden screwed up by staying in for too long, and Kamala Harris didn't give a good answer on The View. So I think they'll avoid taking, both the Democrats and the press will avoid almost entirely taking responsibility for what happened, or accurately describing what happened in totality, and rather just blame two individuals for their errors. Hope I'm wrong, but that'd be my guess. That'd be my guess.
You know, I fear that you're right. I think that, you know, unfortunately, and I voted for Trump, and I hope that he gets into office for many reasons, but and all based on issues. But you know, the concern is that he won't be allowed to actually do the job that the people voted him in to do.
Yeah.
As a result of the type of, you know.
Yeah, but he'd have a better, if he does win, he'll have a better chance of doing the job if he stops.
If he shuts up sometimes, right?
Well, not just shuts up, but if he actually reaches out, and if he has an appreciation for the feelings of those who will be so upset if he wins, and if he stops calling the press the enemy of the people, and tries to convince them to give him a fair hearing. I think, again, I could see why he'd be reluctant.
This is Mark Halperin from Friday Morning.
To lose. This is not an election where it's clear who's going to win, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. That'll be one of our big topics, is why it is that so many people in my life are now saying Kamala Harris is going to win. I don't predict. Don't think when I've said Trump's the favorite. I'm not predicting he's the favorite. My sources are telling me that. There are a lot of people now who think Kamala Harris is going to win. We'll talk about why that is. Daybook, then some new ads, and we're going to talk about that. Again, delighted everybody's here. Guys, how was Halloween? Weekend. J.D. Vance, Michigan today, North Carolina, 1 o'clock Michigan, 5 o'clock North Carolina. And then he also is west on Saturday, Vegas and Arizona. And Joe Biden. All right, guys, let's talk about why it is that so many people in my life are now saying they think Harris is going to win. A lot of it's based on women voters. We all know that. If she wins, it's going to be powered by women. And the early vote in Pennsylvania, big Politico story that people are sending around, says early vote heavily women. So that's one thing that people are citing. Then the latest round, and it's amongst the last rounds of public polls, show an edge to Harris. Again, if you go through the methodology of them and you compare them to private polls, you'd say, even though their margin of error, they're misleading because Harris isn't really up in these states. But go ahead and put up the one that's got a bunch of poll numbers on it. This shows polls from Marist, Epic MRA, Emerson. All of them show Harris ahead. Harris ahead in Michigan, Harris ahead in the Silver State, Harris ahead in Pennsylvania, Harris ahead in Wisconsin. Trump, as this tweet says, not above 49 in any of them. Again, is this because Harris is closing strong, is undecided vote? We don't know. But that's part of why Democrats are feeling good. The last Detroit Free Press poll, which I think was included in that batch, so we don't need the other graphic. All of those show Harris up. In addition, her events have been very good. In addition, Donald Trump made a provocative, threatening remark about Liz Cheney. So Democrats are saying he's unhinged. He's going to turn off undecided voters. And finally, she's got a lot of celebrities at her event, which probably is not going to backfire at this stage, and it's building enthusiasm. So, Dan, is this a blue mirage, or is in fact these little bits of data creating not just the kind of hope and a prayer sensibility, but is it possible that Harris is actually moving into the victory here at the end?
Look, anything is possible right now, excuse me, in a race that is this close. I think, you said private data, Senate candidate data still continues to show an extremely tight, if not ever so slight, Trump lead, frankly, in almost all three states. But look, there are some green shoots that are beginning to appear. Obviously, I think everyone would agree you'd rather be up in public polls than down. It just
I think that it's not, everyone that I've talked to down there is not, and it's just, if you've been around Donald Trump, you know not to do that. When I talk to people outside the periphery, a lot of the grifter types, they feel great. They're exuberant.
Those are my best sources, the grifter types.
I'm sure. But I'm just saying that there's a difference between the people at the senior most levels of the campaign are basically warning against this. It's the periphery folks who are getting excited. And so it just depends on who you talk to.
And second, sometimes Donald Trump says things that the press says, oh my God, this is going to hurt him really badly. And it turns out it's either neutral or helps him. Is what he said about Liz Cheney, is that something you think he said on purpose to remind people that Liz Cheney is a supporter of Kamala Harris, or was that?
All right, this is a great point, how much we owe to Elon Musk.
Unlocking of X bin, formerly known as Twitter, because last cycle it was suppressing narratives. Last cycle it was blocking and censoring and silencing people. This cycle it is wide open. How important has Elon Musk's purchase of X been this cycle?
I think it's been important not just for X, but for the others. I mean, you look at what Zuckerberg's been talking about Facebook lately. I mean, they're doing a lot less interference. I think it's the him buying X led to a lot of the expose about what Twitter was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these guys in the digital world know there might be a comeuppance if they do it again. And once, shame on you, but twice, it's starting to be, shame on the regulators for not doing something about it. And I think that they're all a little worried. And not to mention, whereas Trump's True Social is certainly much smaller, it has become a place where they can share a lot of stuff that finds its way over to X. And in many ways, by Trump doing most of what he does on True Social, he's not as overexposed with everything he does the way he was on X. So that's been beneficial to Trump, whether they realize it or not, for him to be mostly on Truth. But yeah, I think it's made a big difference. And that there's just like, hey, nobody's going to stifle what you think. You're allowed to think what you want. You're not going to be punished for it. And the feeling that if these guys get caught trying to, temper stories again, it's going to be really bad. And that the other thing I think is that the guys at Facebook and the guys at Google probably know the reality of what's going on.
What do you mean by that? The state of the race?
The media can tell you all kind of things, and we all hear all kind of things, but they know what the real background numbers are. They know what people are talking about. They know what's being looked at and what's not being looked at in a way that we won't. And I think that they see a very strong movement for Trump, and they don't want that to translate into a Trump presidency and a Republican Congress that has the knives out for them. And so they want to try to play face. They want to try to play fair. And I think what Zuckerberg did from Facebook is a first indication of that. They know more than we do.
In Bezos' column in the Washington Post.
Absolutely.
Kind of calling out the media establishment. Let me ask you this question. You talked earlier about the social putting its thumb on the scale, mainstream press putting its thumb on the scale. Obviously, in this day and age, sadly, that's to be expected. We know that a lot of those mainstream outlets are propaganda organs. I mean, the Washington Post at this point, my God, might as well just slap a DNC label on it. But let me ask you this question. When the election officials start to put the thumb on the scale in the form of election fraud, and again, it was alleged in 2020.
Okay, great point there on when you have one major social media platform open up, the profound changes that it creates all across social media and in our national conversation.
So it was scheduled why he went.
Okay, this is from Thursday evening, Mark Halperin.
And the vice president did her event in Phoenix. Byron York, a conservative writer who's a kind of opinion writer I like because he goes out and actually covers stuff, made the point that I made a few days ago, but he did it based on these rallies. In the end game of presidential campaigns, typically one side has big, exuberant events, well-staged, exciting, with a sense of momentum, and the other one, the one that ends up losing, have less impressive events, less energy in their events. That's not the case. As Byron York wrote today, both these campaigns are ending with events that give their supporters a feeling that they're going to win. These are big, raucous events with thousands of people, and I'm presuming that will keep up all the way through election day. More public and private polls, or more, I'd say, media polls and political polls came out today. Almost all of them within the margin of error. There's a few outliers, but there's no real change regarding those. Interesting in my world today, something I can't really explain to you, but I feel I'll pass it on because it's a tea leaf or two. More independent analysts who I talk to, people who are very experienced in politics, but aren't partisans or aren't employed by either side. More of them today looked at the data and said they thought Trump was going to win. They thought the odds were very high that Donald Trump would win. However, a lot of people, including some Republicans and some people in the media, said to me today that their spidey sense, their gut was that Harris was going to win. I can't account really for either, but that's how I experienced my day. Now, as you
Right, this is from November 1st. Sarah Isgur.
I'm sure
in
listeners
the
would like to
Dispatch.
know what you think about
Right, this is the Never Trump conservative Republicans.
that. I'll go first, which is there's different ways to judge the end of a campaign, and I think I've talked about this a lot when I mentioned 2016. When I mentioned 2016, and I thought Clinton would win until about the Friday before the election, when you're listening to this probably, because of a few things. One, she went to Michigan, and I just thought, oh my goodness, her internal polling, like you would never go to Michigan at this point. Time is your most valuable resource. She's not just like up by a point in Michigan. They must have her down in Michigan, which is wild. And I was like, ruh-roh. But also a a story that I saw this one line in, and it talked about how the Clinton staffers weren't hooking up with each other. And I really believe that there is a whole other metric that you can gauge which campaign is winning based on fun, and hooking up is fun. I don't know who is having the Randy good time on any campaigns right now, but it does appear to me that the Trump team is having more fun in these closing days than the Harris team. And
okay, I never thought of that angle. Sarah Isgur, she was with the Trump campaign and the first Trump administration. All right, this is the New York Times, Patrick Healy. I think he has an important point here.
After Donald Trump won in 2016, his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, who has been a pollster for decades, made a comment about voter behavior that I think applies to the Trump-Kamala Harris election too. This is what Conway said. One thing that was missed all along in this election is something we noticed early on, which is that there's a difference to voters between what offends you and what affects you. And Conway kept going with this. She said, and they were being told constantly, stare at this, care about this, make this the deal breaker once and for all. And they were told that 5 or 6 times a week about different things. And yet they voted the way voters have always voted, she said, on things that affect them, not just on things that offend them. The final polls by the New York Times and Siena College came out yesterday for the 7 big swing states, and those polls show an extremely tight race, just too tight for anyone to predict with accuracy who's going to win on Tuesday. Digging into those poll numbers, I found myself thinking about Kellyanne Conway's comment. Trump is more competitive this time around in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin than he was in 2020 and 2016, and those 3 are all states that Harris must win or is counting on winning. And in our New York Times focus groups with voters in those states, people brought up what affected them far more than what offended them. I think this crystallizes Trump's best chance of winning on Tuesday. A large majority of the country thinks America is on the wrong track and wants a change in the direction of our government. We've done 61 focus groups overall with 680 people. And from the start, people have brought up inflation, the cost of living, housing costs, interest rates, things that affect them far more than they've brought up Trump's behavior and offensive language. In 2016, Democrats thought Trump's Access Hollywood comments would offend so many people that there was no way he could win. Today, Democrats think other voters will be as offended as they are when a Trump ally calls Puerto Rico garbage, or when Trump says he'll protect women whether they like it or not. Look, yes, plenty of independent voters and undecided voters and Nikki Haley Republicans and late-breaking voters, they don't like that language. But many don't vote on it. Trump's language for them is not a voting issue. They vote on what affects them. And Kamala Harris has just never had a great argument for that. She's been the second in command to a president who many voters blame for the economy not being better. And she hasn't put forward over and over again the ideas or the sales pitch that could convince large numbers of non-Democrats that she has the answers and the ability to solve what affects them. Harris's single biggest challenge in this campaign has been saying how she would govern and lead differently than Joe Biden, whose approval ratings are disastrously skirting 40%. As my newsroom colleague Nate Cohn said this past weekend, no party has retained control of the White House when so many Americans were dissatisfied with the country or the president. And yet, as I said, this race is too tight to make predictions.
Hey, Sean Spicer. Whoops, this isn't the right link that I wanted to throw in here. I had Sean Spicer, had Mark Halperin and company on his show about 3 days ago. Here are some highlights from that conversation.
And go it alone by yourself. If they call
Reese's
in New York.
Major candy.
I just want to. I asked this. I drove carpool this morning. I said to everyone, "What is your what was your favorite? Do you guys? Is there a favorite candy?" Like
You said twice a week. That's twice a year.
Twice a year. Apologies.
I'm totally in agreement. I find it completely bizarre. We do it. Just always have more daylight.
Careful in my words. JD Vance, at least in my world, I get more texts every time he's on television. Wow, how impressive. Mark, do you think that that the roles are reversed, or are we just seeing it from our own partisan lenses?
I don't know about swing voters, undecided voters. I know certainly there was some disappointment when J.D. Vance was picked. Some Republicans, it wasn't their first choice. Some didn't understand the pick. I think there's no doubt that he's held in greater esteem by the base than he was, in part because his media appearances are both substantive and combative. And I think the base really appreciates that. I don't have a good feel for how Democrats feel about Walz. I don't hear him brought up nearly as much, positive or negative. He's certainly become a punching bag for the right. So I don't think there's any doubt that the gradation has shifted. JD is considered more successful than initial. I'd say Walz less so by the bases, but I don't think in any way that really matters all that much.
What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that JD Vance, not only has he proven to be pretty successful with the media, but if you look at his schedule, the number of town halls he's done across the Midwest and in the Sunbelt states, in these small towns, just one after the other. I mean, that's why they picked him, to help with turnout, with those base voters kind of off the beaten path. And I think conversely, Tim Walz was picked largely because he got hot in the media at the right time. And, what's surprising is up until the last few weeks, he was not engaging with the media. And when he did, it did not produce, good headlines because so many questions emerged about his background that mostly what came out of those interviews, whether it was local or national, was what he said to kind of clean up, prior statements. And so in that regard, I think, Tim Walz has spent a lot of time going to fundraisers and being a little bit on the campaign trail, doing rallies on his own. But I think net, J.D. Vance has been more effective than Walz.
I'll tell you another difference is you don't hear anybody saying they should have picked Rubio, they should have picked Burgum. I don't hear that at all. And even now, but especially if Harris loses Pennsylvania, you hear a lot of people saying she should have picked Governor Shapiro. That's perennial, and it's amongst a lot of Democrats, not just the press or the Republicans.
You guys know, I think from my discussions on the morning meeting, jobs reports and other statistics don't convince people, in my opinion. I think they think that the economy is good or that they're safe personally or not, right? But this morning we got a jobs report, 12,000 jobs last month, well below the 100,000 plus that they expected. Dan, we're less than 4 days out. Do you think this matters?
I don't think it helps. I mean, look, Democrats have tried to cheerlead economic statistics for the last 6 months because they've been relatively good and we haven't had a lot of success. So I'm hoping that one that's less rosy is met with kind of, similar shrugs.
Mark, do you think that the Trump campaign, I don't get the sense, at least I know the report just came out today, but I don't get the sense that they're going to seize on this as an issue.
This is part of a general pattern that is a little bit surprising to me, and I don't really have a complete sense of why. If you think back to the spring when people were sort of forecasting this election, even when Joe Biden was the nominee, people talked about college protests, unrest in the Middle East, the Ukraine war, economic data. None of it really seems to matter very much. It's not a big part of the conversation, and I don't get a sense that, with the possible exception of Arab or Muslim American voters in Michigan, I don't get a sense that much of this stuff that's in the news is making a very big difference.
All right, well then let's delve into my next topic. We talked about this in the morning all the time, either in general or then specifically. We've seen a lot of action on surrogates. We started the week, this comedian making this inappropriate bad joke at Madison Square Garden. Then we got President Biden saying the word garbage, Mark Cuban talking about women and Trump not caring about strong women around him, not listening to them. I think certain surrogates matter in that they bring their constituency along, right? I think Robert F. Kennedy matters because he has a group of people that care about him and him alone. When I've talked to people prior even to the election, they'll live or die for JFK, right? And so when he says vote for me and Trump says I'm going to give this guy a job, well, he doesn't get the job if he doesn't win, and so therefore I think it's somewhat transactional, but it helps him. Other people maybe get them fired up. I think Taylor Swift might help people register to vote, but I don't know that it motivates them to vote necessarily. What do you think the lesson of this cycle is going forward in terms of how to use surrogates, Mark? Do campaigns take anything away from the use of surrogates this cycle?
Well, technology may change, but I think in this cycle, surrogates can get you a little bit of a pop on the traditional media. But I think the way they've been used is through social, either through their platforms that they have uniquely, like if they're big on Instagram, or coverage that they get, and how influencers and others cover them on social. So I think that the Trump campaign, Republicans, I think, are normally outgunned on celebrities. I think they've actually done as well as any Republican campaign I've seen in getting like Brett Favre in Green Bay at the last few days.
Cycle. I mean, Dan's point about podcasters. Where do you think? I think this only grows. People get paid to share their audience, whether it's a podcast or just an Instagram page, and influencers are going to be bigger and bigger, not just at the presidential level, but down ballot.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to think otherwise. And campaigns are, in this realm, in an unregulated area. You can pay them.
And we'll go both sides, so just feel good about that. If Kamala Harris loses, who gets the blame? Who is it going to be? I mean, I know there's a lot of narratives. It's Joe Biden didn't get out early enough. She didn't engage with the media. What would you predict is the reason that people point to largely that she loses?
Well, I think there's going to be a couple things. I think there's going to be the initial knee jerk, which is, it's not us, it's you, right? It was Joe Biden's fault that he didn't get out sooner. Harris didn't run a great campaign. She didn't engage with the media. She wasn't more specific. I think the bigger issue if she loses is the signs of it were in plain sight for over 2 years. And that a lot of the data, and the problems that she's having today, Trump's performance with Latinos, with Black men, the loss of the working class, not just whites, but people of color, the struggles a little bit in the suburbs. Again, this is assuming that she loses, is that Democrats have just failed to understand the Trump voter, what motivates people, the policy gains that he has to attract these voters. And they simply have said, especially since January 6th, there is no way that 50.1% of this country will ever vote for the guy again. And they could not.
So just before I get to Mark, let me ask you this. If you took Kamala Harris out and you did have longer and you had a primary, do you think that would have, assuming you lose, right? But we'll get to the other side. Would another candidate, in your opinion, have fared better than her?
Well, look, all those structural things I just mentioned are pro-Trump, right? Latinos are attracted to Trump on the economy, on kind of safe neighborhoods, and even on immigration. What are we hearing from young Black men? It's about the economy and the devastation of inflation. If you look at all the inroads that he has made with the Democratic base, sure, could Josh Shapiro have performed better in the Philadelphia suburbs and maybe had a little more trust in the Scranton area? Sure. Would Josh Shapiro have been successful selling that in Atlanta, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Milwaukee? I don't know. I mean, because again, it's not just that they distrust Democrats, it's that they are attracted to Donald Trump. And it is harder to peel off a voter who is affirmatively supportive than someone who's just disgusted with your own party.
Mark, who do people blame in sort of the maybe, and again, I'm not asking who you would blame. Where do you think the narrative comes from the media community in terms of why Harris lost?
70 Biden, 20 Harris, 10 other.
Far-right organization, designated terrorist group in Canada and New Zealand. So let's get started. We'll talk about Trump and we'll talk about Kamala Harris. So let's start with Trump. Gavin, we'll start with you. So Trump is currently in several court cases of being accused of rape, election interference, and different things.
Rape? Wow.
Isn't he not? And what do you think of all of this, and why are you supporting him?
I just realized I dislike Destiny quite a bit because he represents this sort of cuck culture. But I realize I hate British people even more. You're all retarded. You're the victims of your BBC government-funded propaganda. Rape? He was charged with rape? One thing you have to understand is our justice system is fucking garbage. Our judges are retarded. So when you hear someone has been accused or someone's going to court or someone was sentenced or someone's in jail, it doesn't mean they're guilty. It means they're victims of lawfare. And Trump has been a victim of lawfare since he started running in 2016. In 2015, he was a victim of lawfare.
And this was in a civil trial where you can make all sorts of accusations in a civil trial.
He has no answer. There's no answer. There's just a cucked response. They're just mad that their Big Daddy Trump lost.
Are you calling me a cuck?
Yes, you are a cuck for Trump. Yes. You like to sit in the corner.
You let men fuck you in the ass, and you're not even gay.
First of all, even if I did let men fuck me in the ass, that's not cuckoldry. You even know what cuckoldry is?
I predicted your divorce to the minute, and you're calling me a cuck? You're in the dictionary.
A cuck and a rapist. Yeah.
Wait, so let's go back to Trump. So you're saying that. So let's talk about. So he was in court. They did find him guilty. Are you saying that's not, Gavin? Are you saying that's not actually counted as what happens in court?
Okay, this is how retarded both of you are, by the way. You're both on the left, I can tell, because you said rape. You molested them.
No, you don't. No, you don't do that.
Yeah, you do.
No,
see your problem? You know what your problem is, Steve?
No, you don't.
You don't exist.
You don't do.
You're Chat GPT.
You don't do.
You don't know people.
You never. I do know people, bro. What are you talking about?
You've never been in a fight.
Gavin, you're a broke fucking loser nobody who is fucking. I don't even know where the fuck you live right now. Like,
you don't know people. You don't know the world. So everything you get is from online.
I know
So
plenty
you're
of people.
AI.
I know plenty of people
You're
that
in the
know you too,
uncanny
Gavin.
valley.
I know
You
so
don't-
much about you
you
from
don't
people that I
relate
know
to
behind the
people.
scenes, Gavin. You're
You
a piece
haven't-
of
you
shit.
haven't lived.
You're a
You haven't
scumbag.
lived.
Not the life that you have, apparently. I mean, I'm happy to say that.
Yeah, I'm happily married with 3 kids
Yeah, I'm
in
sure.
New York
I'm
City.
sure.
No one fucks me
Uh-huh.
in the ass.
Yep.
And you can't predict my divorce like I predicted your divorce.
Yeah. How much does your wife keep up with your personal life, Gavin?
So,
What?
How much does your wife keep up with your personal life, Gavin?
My wife is intimately involved in my personal life.
Okay.
No black men fuck my
Wait,
wife.
so talking about
And-
Trump.
Also, hold on. I got a
Well,
package.
it's
I'm
down-
getting 1 second,
politics
okay?
is
You can
down
talk,
to
Gavin, though, because
culture.
nothing you say is valuable
So
anyway.
being
So 1
less
second.
woke.
Okay, sorry. Gavin's mom needed me for a second.
See, another reason that you don't exist in real life is the way you talk. If we were in person, you would be choked out right now.
Hey, if we were in person, you'd probably be drunk off your ass and get arrested and thrown in the fucking tank, okay?
I would be arrested for assaulting you.
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
That's why you talk the way you talk, because
Okay.
you live online.
Yeah.
You don't understand.
People say
how
that,
the
and then I
real
see them
world
in real life, and they're just these demure little submissive boys. So I don't know. Maybe. Listen, if you see me, you beat the shit out of me, okay? Knock yourself
Listen,
out.
You let men fuck you in the ass. You define submissive.
Do you think about that a lot, Gavin?
No, but you call me a cuck and say I'm submissive? It's insane.
What, you seem obsessed with talking about other men in their sex lives.
You brought it up. You called me a cuck, moron.
You started talking about my shit before you literally started the conversation off calling me a cuck.
Yeah. You define culturally the fall of man. And the way you talk to me is proof of that.
Okay.
I remember last year at this time, I admit, I was on the verge of tears watching the final Donald Trump rally in Michigan with Mike Pence, and Mike Pence gave this beautiful benediction, and I had this great feeling of dread that the Donald Trump reign was over, that Trump was going to lose, and he was going to slink away from public life. And yeah, this time last year, I was on the verge of tears, and I feel completely different this time around. But there was one video clip from 2020 that maybe worth revisiting here.
If Trump wins, put it in my ass. You heard it here first. If Trump wins, put it in my ass. Put it in my ass. Put it in my ass. Trump can literally piss on my face.
Trump can shit on my face and I would be so happy. I would fucking die for Trump 2020. I would die for him. Put it in my ass.
And Barron, you can put it in my ass too. Barron deserves anal, yeah?
Doesn't he?
Barron's 13 years old.
Anybody deserves anal.
Okay, no. Barron does not deserve anal. He is 13 and he's a child. Put it in my ass.
What's your favorite Trump policy?
I'm big on the immigration thing. I love Latinos, but MS-13 is actually the biggest piece of shit I've ever met. Face tats are ratchet, and
I hate Bernie Sanders, you fucking
Bernie
slut.
Sanders is a communist, and communism does not work.
I honestly have no idea what that word means.
Liberals are also retarded. No offense to liberals, actually full of You heard it here first. If Trump wins, put
Okay, some rambunctious young ladies from 2020 there. All right, this is Robert Wright, Mickey Kaus getting together again a few days
Here's
ago.
how I imagined our conversation today playing out. I thought I would say, so Mickey, you're voting for Trump, and you'd be like, no, I'm undecided. Me, Trump supporter, me responsible for the next 4 years of disaster after Trump is elected? No, my hands are clean. And I would start, and I'd be like going nuts, of course. And you'd say, oh, by the way, in fact, I just gave Kamala some campaign advice. And of course, your advice is become Trump. Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
You know, the direction has been pretty constant for the last 2 weeks. It's like the polls continue to move in Trump's favor.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so, actually. And that was, as you know, I'm a disciple of Mark Halperin, and for weeks he was hinting that the private polls showed movement in Trump's direction, and they did. But if it continued, you would expect
So I'm not the only disciple of Mark Halperin.
to be some polls that showed Trump.
I became a disciple of Mark Halperin from listening to Mickey Kaus say that he was a disciple of Mark Halperin. This is 20 years ago.
Having a significant lead over Harris, and we haven't seen that. He's sort of flattened out, and Harris has caught up a bit. And I would not say that the recent momentum, like in the past week, has been in Trump's favor. It's more like,
But those girls were making an important point. All right, whenever you have a girlfriend, a lover, a relationship, a wife, all right, she will always exact a price. Women are a luxury good. All right, you can usually live your life without them, but they'll make your life a lot better, but a lot more complicated, and they'll always exert a price. But if they like you, the price will be quite light. Right? If they like you, they will be the wildest slut in the world, right? If they're not wild in bed, it's usually because they don't particularly like you. If they demand all sorts of expensive entertainment and that you keep giving and giving to them, it's because they don't particularly like you. So I think, influenced by my Australian upbringing, I have not put a great deal of effort into my dating life and into my love life and into my sex life over the years. And I've been blessed that a number of women, really, really liked me. So I didn't have to pay some exorbitant price to do the things that I wanted to do with them. Life is a lot easier in general if people like you.
Kamala's caught up a bit. So
wait. What polls are showing her catching up?
well, if you look at the Real Clear Politics average, which allegedly is swamped by right-wing polls, if that means anything, she is gained in the last bit.
In the national.
Yeah, all her polls, all the polls show her getting a little bit recently. It may not be enough. It always tightens at the end. I agree that the underlying, like month-long, 2-month-long drift has been pro-Trump, but I wouldn't. If I were to bet, I would bet on Trump. What I call the Moby Grape problem, but it's been discussed in other terms on Halperin's podcast. Moby Grape, remember, if you don't remember, was a great rock group in the 60s, maybe the most talented collection. And their first album was so good, it had 6 singles and 6 songs that were good enough to be singles. And they decided to release them all at once, unprecedented. We're releasing 6 singles all at once, and they cannibalized each other so that none of them became hits. You couldn't publicize 6 singles enough, so none of them were publicized enough.
Well,
to
you're
become
dividing your constituency. I mean, they're gonna,
Right. And the idea is you need one message.
Right.
You can't have 3 messages. You need one message, and you have to hammer it home day after day. And so they decided their one message was going to be Trump is a fascist. Now they have abandoned that, and they're focusing on 3 messages. Trump is a fascist. I'm good for the economy, and abortion, although abortion was sort of always there. And I think they're right. I think one of the implications of the filer faster thesis is you have room for more than one message now. You have room for 3 messages. But I think that's what they were thinking. But the reason they did it is because she was flatlining in the polls. They didn't.
Right. She hasn't kept changing her message. She isn't riffing off the events of the day. She isn't desperately trying to ride the news because she knows she's winning. Right. She's doing these desperate things because she knows she's losing.
It's like Trump. They didn't keep picking. They didn't keep picking up supporters.
But flatlining wouldn't have killed her because she was appreciably ahead. That the polls then started to narrow, and I think the shift in strategy is one reason. I mean,
no, I think the sagging came before the shift in strategy. Why would they shift in strategy if it was working? They wouldn't do that.
Well, yeah, it wasn't working, but it wasn't working as badly as what they shifted to. I mean,
keep in mind, they have better polls than we do. That's the whole Mark Halperin thing. Mark Halperin's whole thing was, I have talked to the people in both camps. They have internal polls that are much more sophisticated and better than our polls we see in public, and their polls show that Trump is gaining, and that is why Kamala shifted, and that's why the Trump people are so damn confident.
No, he was gaining. That's true.
This has not turned up in any real dramatic way in the public polls, but a little bit. But for all we know, Kamala was cratering in her private polls. We just don't know.
Does Halperin say that the polls now show Trump winning? The private polls.
He's tempered that. I think he would still say that he thinks Trump is going to win, but he's dramatically tempered it. He no longer says we will know. If trends continue, we will know on election day that Trump has won. Turrentine, who is the Democrat on Halperin's,
right, Dan Turrentine,
one of Halperin's podcasts, was saying, look, I think Harris better win more than one of these Sun Belt more than one of these Sun Belt states, because she might lose 2 of the Rust Belt states, 2 of the Blue Belt states. So that's Pennsylvania and Michigan, or Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. He's not saying that anymore. So I just think she's better off than she was 2 weeks ago.
I don't know. I think I don't see it in the public polls. I don't see it at all in either
Look
the
at the latest-
RCP
look at-
average or the Nate Silver average.
But the
Well,
RCP
first of all,
is diminishing for Michigan and Wisconsin, I think.
yeah, well, I mean, I think even there you don't see any favorable trend in any of those 3 states.
Not impressed by the Jeffrey Goldberg revelations?
Remind me. I mean, I saw a
He had
Twitter
General
thread-
Kelly saying that Trump was a fascist. Basically, it was a
Oh,
week.
Jeff-
It was a week sort of encore of his last go round, which was Trump mocks servicemen and says they're suckers and losers.
Yeah.
He did a sort of a second tour of those generals, and they all said Trump was a fascist. And the media pressed it for all it was worth, and Trump and Kamala scheduled the whole speech around it until she realized at the last minute that maybe it was not a good idea to have this be the only string in her bow.
Well, first of all, I'm disappointed because at first I thought you meant revelations about Jeffrey Goldberg. That would have made me much happier. But the
Okay, here are some of my bookmarks that I found on the platform X. We run through them. Spoke to a consultant for Pennsylvania Democrats today. She said in the past week, she and her colleagues have grown increasingly doubtful that Kamala can pull off a win in the state, explaining that voter registration, early voting data combined with internal polling shows a lack of enthusiasm, especially with Latino registered Democrats who voted for Biden in 2020, and that enthusiasm gap hasn't budged despite the Harris campaign's record ad spending. Then Kamala Harris did an interview with Subway Takes, was never released because she sounded too stupid. This is from the New York Times. All right, here is a New York City council member representing District 19 of Queens. Just spoke to a Democrat consultant friend of mine who told me I could repeat some of what we discussed. Nobody really thinks that Kamala is going to win. Canvassing is going poorly almost everywhere, with few exceptions. The Democratic Party is getting their high follower influencer accounts to push out motivational stories to try to keep morale up and get them over the finish line with some dignity, but it's not going great. The Iowa poll was good to give a shot of adrenaline to volunteers, but nobody important believes those numbers are real. Of all the swing states, they're hoping Michigan comes through and possibly a late night miracle in Pennsylvania, but nobody's counting on either of them. They don't think Trump is going to flip Virginia or New Hampshire, but they've even entered this conversation is indicative of how bad things could turn out. The early vote counts are just beyond what they expected to see for Republican turnout, as Democratic strategists rethinking whether it was a good idea to make such a big push to broaden early voting in the first place. Republican low propensity voters are activated in a way nobody really expected, and the polls did not capture it. The campaign has switched entirely to a woman versus man messaging. Liberal white women are the only reliable voting bloc that they can even identify at this point. The priority now for the Democrats is saving some down ballot races and flipping the House of Representatives so that the night isn't a total embarrassment for the Democrats. Let's see what else we got. All right, Trump campaign has released a memo showing that in Arizona, urban turnout is down 385,000 votes compared to this point in 2020. Female turnout is down 170,000 votes compared to 2020. Rural turnout is up 14,000 votes compared to 2020. In Georgia, urban turnout is down 153,000 votes. Female turnout is down 47,000. Rural turnout is up 172,000. In Michigan, urban turnout down 322,000. Female turnout down 205,000. Rural turnout up 56,000. North Carolina, urban turnout down 175,000. Female turnout down 154,000. Rural turnout up 27,000. Nevada, urban turnout down 191,000. Female turnout down 126,000. Pennsylvania, urban turnout down 381,000. Female turnout is down 451,000. Wisconsin, urban turnout is down 101,000. Female turnout down 238,000. So it is these voting numbers that give the Trump campaign a great deal of confidence heading into tomorrow's election.
I mean, it seems to me that first of all, she did. Yeah.
That awaits Ruth Shalit's lawsuit against him.
We need more than that's going to uncover.
I don't know.
Okay, that's Ruth Shalit is suing the Atlantic.
She won summary judgment. She has discovery powers now.
Ooh.
You can discover a lot.
Ooh.
Anyway,
I'm warming up to Ruth's side of this argument.
Okay.
No, but Kamala did call him Trump a fascist. It was kind of a Biden-like moment where somebody said, "So is he a fascist?" And it seems like she felt like, I've got to be the new decisive Kamala and say, yes, he's a fascist.
Yeah, right.
But I think, it seems to me like I think maybe this is a mistake the campaign has made. They got kind of trolled out of their strategy. Their strategy was be upbeat, do kind of a Rose Garden strategy, give speeches, give the occasional, well-orchestrated interview. You've done the debate. He's the one who's afraid to debate a second time, so they can't say you're afraid of exposure. You do some interviews. But it seems to me they got worried because the polling gap started narrowing, and they did two things. First of all, they reacted to the allegation that she was afraid to really go out and mix it up. And it seems like the more she mixed it up, the more trouble she got into, because she's just not very good at that. And she went more and more negative on Trump. And I guess they've got data showing they have some reason to think that's going to work, maybe to get out the vote. But
her initial strategy was, as you say, was to dump Meachimism, dump the end of democracy is dying, and focus on positive things. And then there was sort of she failed to make progress in the polls, and the conventional way of putting it was she failed to seal the deal because, in fact, she is a very unimpressive candidate. So then they reverted back to the Trump is a fascist thing.